the 4th day of June, 2022. Hi, everybody. I'm going to be your host, Dana Durnford. Hope you're doing well. Also known as the Nuclear Proctologist.org. And you can call in 709-589-4406. 4406. Google wouldn't let us live stream the regular time. I've never had them. Never seen that show up on my screen before where it says it wouldn't let me live stream. And I said Google live stream was down. I checked after. Lots of people were still live streaming, but that don't mean nothing, I guess. It ended my stream at that point, and so this is a new stream you're watching right now. I started up an hour ago. And we're an hour behind, so let's get after it, I suppose. And so we're going to cover, we got a poll for starters. We'll just touch on, should journalists, academics, and professors, etc., who lied about Fukushima fallout work at Fukushima nuclear meltdown site? And multiple melted reactors and decades of reactor cores is melted down. And we're going to cover the first couple of weeks. We've done 2 shows in the last 2 weeks like this. This is the third one of headlines from the first month that I've never covered before on this site or this show, or at all, period. And so that should make for some great entertainment value. Just so you're going to be familiar, because we're going to be talking about week 1, week 2 after nuclear accident, which was, it's hard to call it an accident because it was built on a fault line where they have 1,000 earthquakes a year and a 3,000-year legacy of tsunamis. So it's bizarre, right? Okay, we got some interesting news on renewables. I'm going to take you back to 2020. In 2020, there was 261 gigawatts of renewables worldwide that came online, and that was considered equal to 300 nuclear power plants, the animosity equivalent, the same thing. But in renewables, in a 12-month period. Currently, at that time, it was 440 nuclear power plants. Today, there's only 413. So that was 2020. 2021, International Energy Agency sees renewables overtaking fossil and nuclear, and there's a lot of media around this story, by 2026. So in 2021, there was 290 gigawatts of new capacity. That's equal to 330 large nuclear power plants coming online in just 12 months. So that's 630 nuclear power plants came online in 24 months. They said by 2026, between 2020 and 2026, renewables will grow by another 60% to 4,800 gigawatts, which is roughly the size of the capacity of all fossil, gas, oil, coal, and nuclear power combined worldwide over the next 5 years. So on the weekend, the 2023 predictions came out, and they're stunning. So in between 2020 and 2021, in 24 months, was 630 nuclear power plants where the renewables came online. In this year, they expect, their prediction is going to be the equivalent of, in just 1 year, just this year only, will be equal to all of Germany and Spain combined energy. in renewables are going to come online. And it's going to jump by a stunning 107 gigawatts in a single 12 month. So this year they're expecting 440 gigawatts. So in 12 months, there's more renewables came online than all current nuclear on the planet combined in 12 months. And none of them are looking at geothermal. It's barely a fraction of a percent, even though it's perfect. It's everywhere. You don't need storage. You don't need wind or solar. It doesn't use commodities like gas, oil, and coal and nuclear. There's no adverse side effects. You don't have to sacrifice everybody 60 and older if it breaks down. You don't have to abandon your communities and leave your pets behind to starve to death. It's just geothermal. It's everywhere. It's simple. And it's half the price of cheap nuclear, any such thing as cheap nuclear today. There is no such thing as a cheap nuclear, of course. But the cheapest nuclear predictions, geothermal is basically 5 million a megawatt. Megawatts like power for 24 hours year long for 1,000 homes. That's a pretty good payoff. So what did Oppenheimer, Robert J. Oppenheimer, what was he talking about in his famous revelation after the first atomic test? I'll play that for you, and then I'll show you what he was talking about, why he said, "I am death, the destroyers of worlds." It wasn't from bombs either, per se.
He knew the world would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that one way or another.
And so what he was talking about wasn't so much the bomb as they're showing you in that video. It was about the radioactive fallout from nuclear itself, whether from nuclear power, nuclear dumping, nuclear accidents. You didn't need a war to exterminate the species in increments over time. You just needed radioactive fallout. And that's why we got a poll tonight somewhere. Hi, everybody. Thanks for everybody. Should journalists, academics, and professors, etc., who lied about Fukushima that we're going to start covering immediately, follow work at the Fukushima nuclear meltdown sites themselves? We have a massive 13 people on our show. I've never seen nothing like this. Normally, if you do work really, really hard and you're consistent, you're never early, you're never late, you never lie, you're 100% honest, you get more people, you don't get less each week. And the most important subject in human history is, it shows desperation of the nuclear industry. Crews continue Japan radiation fears. This was on March 24, 2011. Japan radiation fears limit food exports. Crews continued mission to stabilize the nuclear plant. Well, nobody can stabilize the nuclear plant. United Kingdom. Hello. Hi, it's Dana. It's Dana. You're live. Are you calling into the show?
Yeah, it's Robbie. I'm in chat at the moment. I've just got your little note from Hinkley T if you want me to do it.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Are we live online now?
You're live online as we talk. Yep, you're talking live to everybody.
So about 6 or 8 months ago, I emailed and contacted Hinkley Point C. You know that I live in England and I'm totally anti-British and anti-UK and everything.
That's for everybody's not aware. Thank you. Yep, thank you. So you contacted people about Hinkley Point C. That's where you left off, right?
Yeah. So I asked them this question. I don't know whether I correctly written it or not, but this is what I wrote. I wrote, hello, Hinkley Point C, cost the planet approximately 9 million tonnes of CO2 to produce. How long will it take Hinkley to utilise the 9 million tonnes of CO2? And it's to build. Also, in 6 years' time, will it end its life cycle? How much CO2 will it produce? Etc., etc., etc. Do you get the idea? What I talk about? Do you want the full thing?
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
I can put it in chat, actually. I'll copy and paste it and put it in chat. But it's more than two figures, if you know what I'm saying, 200 figures. Well,
Can you move your mouth closer to the phone for me?
Yeah, that's another thing. It's difficult. Is that better?
It's a bit better, yeah. Or so that I'm having a hard time with my ears.
Yeah, well, I'm in England, like, on a mobile phone, so I've only got like 100 minutes, so you know what I'm saying. Well, what the answer was one of them Fabian answers that they gave you, you know, which was like, thank you for your questions on Hinkley Point C, blah-de, 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 blah-de. Absolutely no answer to the question that I gave them, you know?
No, I'm familiar with people that done what you're doing, and they all got the same response. They got kind of like a chain letter back that they send out to constituents.
Yeah, you get questions like that, don't you, you know? Anyway, it's really echoing. I can't hear you. I'll put the phone down now. You have a wonderful evening, yeah?
Yeah, thank you for calling. We're glad to hear about it. We appreciate you trying. That's big. We really appreciate you trying. Thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah, I'll try to put all that in chat, but it'll be 200 words at a time, yeah?
Yeah, you're stuck with that. Okay, my friend. Hugs for you. Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah, bye-bye. So that's England, UK. I don't have a long-distance plan for England either. That won't be too bad. It's not like years ago when they would rob you blind, right? And let me see here. Keep going now. So, crews continue mission to stabilize the nuclear power plants. This is the 24th of March. 24th of March. The plants are all melted down at this stage. They're completely gone. And the industry is aware of that, by the way. Let me give you one depiction. You can see how much damage just to reactor 4. If just one of these reactors blew up, you couldn't get close to any of the other reactors. And in Japan, you had multiple reactors blowing up. And it tossed the fuel assemblies and the fuel rods and the pellets all over the site. These are lethal doses everywhere. And we have presentations of 6 videos based on 1,900 pictures they released in 2012 in my playlist, where we go through the site over and over, and we go through all these pictures. It took 6 videos to produce it all and talk our way through it. And there was no one in there trying to... Well, first off, you can't repair a building that don't exist anymore. Do you get where I'm going? Second off, it's nuclear reactors are being thrown a mile high in the sky and then falling back down on the site. There's no way to survive there. So Canada, United States announced food restrictions. It was March the 23rd, 2011. By June the 14th, 2011, Canada removed all restrictions. And 55 countries kept restrictions on 14 prefectures, not just the Fukushima prefecture. Well, you see where they're harvesting food there right now, right alongside of 1 ton bags of radiation, is in the no-go zone itself, surrounded by no-go zones. And so the ban was by 55 countries and 14 prefectures for over 10 years. Those people were replaced with the pro-nuclear, and then they lifted all restrictions. Canada removed all restrictions after 93 days, while other countries kept the ban in place. So incredibly, Canadian nuclear industry is absurdly evil. That's absurdness and evil. That's a whole different level of evil. And so everybody in Canada is sick because they removed all the restrictions. Japan couldn't ship it anywhere, only to Canada, and they did. You can't check seafood with a Geiger counter. You can check and find stuff, but you can't find the rest of it, right? With a handheld, and he's got an inspector in his hand, and they're a bit better than the average ones. Hong Kong Cook operates a radiation detector over shellfish. Shellfish bioaccumulates the radiation 125,000 times more than a fish does. And you can only find certain fractions of gamma with those Geiger counters. Can't find neutrons or betas or alphas or X-rays. And they're not very good at finding alpha on top of that. You know, they will find it. Mine's over there right now at 130 counts per minute. Like the same one as he got, actually. 276,000 becquerels a kilogram right after seizing the soil near Tokyo, 18 million becquerels a square meter. These are runaway numbers. If you see that on your Geiger counter, you're supposed to just run. Anywhere, don't stay where you're to. In fact, they were disposing of radioactive quake debris in Tokyo. They were burning it in Koto, which is part of Tokyo, and radiation fears. Over 1 billion pounds was radioactive that they burned in incinerators across the country. You couldn't get rid of the ash because of radioactive. It was so radioactive. So they should never have burnt it because that comes right across the Pacific Ocean to North America, by the way, in just a couple of days. Concerned about the country's food and water safety. So Nabi is from UK. You can't put links in my description. I got them turned off because we had spammers and I just gave up on it. So if you're trying to put links in, I'm not going to show up. I'll check after, but let me see. Now, I can put links in, but you can't. Not that I do, but I'm going to actually, probably right here in a minute. Just give me a second. Okay, don't worry about it. People were warned not to give tap water to babies 1 year or younger, which means you can't give it to children or adults either. Suggesting that children should be limited, nobody else, is insane. That's the actual definition of insanity. Levels of radioactive iodine, which draws water from the local rivers, contain 210 becquerels per liter of iodine 131. And so they use iodine to manipulate you because it has a short half-life. In Canada, we had iodine 131 at 20 million becquerels per liter. In Japan, it's only 210 becquerels per liter. We had another study out of Ottawa, Canada, 220 million atoms of iodine 129 per liter, 5,500 miles away. So that kind of discrepancy is simply not acceptable, right? That is not acceptable. Just give me a second here. Okay, here we go. They said the level is more than twice the amount considered safe for infants to consume. Well, you're talking about water. You're talking about something you got to drink all the time. So if it's only half, there is no such thing as a safe level, by the way. And to suggest that it's twice the level is even it's more insaner. Because, like, say you only got half of it there, so you drink twice as much water, now you got that dose. So claiming that per liter in drinking water, just because you're talking about bioaccumulation. There is zero safe limits for anthropogenic man-made radiation. And there was 865,000 extra cancers in the first year. In Fukushima Prefecture, there was 13,646 out of 40,000 children with thyroid tumors. Pre-Fukushima was 1 in a million. I think it's stunning when you see stuff like that. It takes us... Now, the journalists actually didn't write this. There's too many details there for a journalist to be able to work that out. This is a very complicated subject. And in order to weave in a lie in a story that smoothly, that could only come from the nuclear energy, the nuclear energy lobbying groups. Adding the level is not an immediate health risk. Well, like, unless you're alongside the fuel rods, none of it's really an immediate health risk per se, typically. If there's an accident, that's different. Right? Because there was communities where you were getting a severe dose of atoms. And you're talking about there's no way not to get sick down the road, vicious illnesses and diseases. Adding the level is not an immediate health risk for adults. Let me see if I can put a link in there. Oh, I did. Look at that. That was an interview I done yesterday over at Monique Wallace's site. That's the second interview I done with Monique. So if he goes over there, give her some love and give her a thumbs up in that video. Adding the level is not immediate health risk for adults. This is why we got a poll. Because of that kind of evil. Should journalists, academics and professors, etc., who lie about Fukushima fallout or let lobbyists use their site to lie about Fukushima fallout work at the Fukushima nuclear meltdown reactors? And like a couple of journalists said, no. That's some pretty evil stuff, eh? Adding the level is not an immediate health risk for adults. And you're talking about something 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. It catches up to you, sequesters in your muscles, your organs, and your bones. It's an insidious statement. It's the most heartless kind of a statement. It's a vicious It better not to even put it there in the first place. It's a vicious lie. That's a vicious, hideous, monstrous. I get upset. I'm apologizing. It's immoral. It's ungodly. It's sinful. It's unholy. It's vile. It's dishonorable. It's corrupt. It's depraved. It's nefarious. It's sinister. It's incendiary. It's subversive. It's malice. It's demonic. It's fiendish to put something like that there. Come on, Dana, you're blowing it out of proportion. No, that's actually evil. They should be locked up for life putting a statement like that in the media. The media should be disbanded and they should be jailed. Dairy farmers dumped the milk in the cornfields in Fukushima prefectures. So look, if your milk is so radioactive, you got to dump it, which is madness because now you're putting it back in the environment. But it means you're supposed to run away. You're not supposed to be there. He's not supposed to be there, wearing a paper mask on top of it. He's in a nuclear wasteland. If your milk is so radioactive, you got to get rid of it. You're in a nuclear wasteland. That's forever. And a journalist would know that. Nearly 2 weeks after the twin March 11th disasters, nuclear scumbags are still struggling to stabilize the damaged and overheated. Does that look like it's overheated? The plume over there is covering the whole planet in 26 days. I don't know, man. Here's damaged reactor 4, the original pictures of it. Does that look like it's damaged or destroyed to anybody? Am I just making a mole out of a molehill out of a single mole? The fuel pools were at the top of the building. There's no top to the building to your left. That's reactor 3. That's reactor 4. And so when I hear leak and damaged, I see red, big time. And I'm not going to sit and take it. I'm not going to sit and be silent either. I'm not going to cower down. I'm not going to be feared and scared of a scum, degenerate, mass-murdering, genocidal, omnicidal industry. I'm not sitting in silence and letting them walk away, destroying the entire future of humanity and all the species. I'm not that person. I don't have it in me to walk away. They're lucky I'm not a prosecutor because I'd be extraditing them in a heartbeat. A plume of black smoke forced workers inside of Unit 3 to evacuate Wednesday. This is on the 23rd we're talking about. The building is actually already gone. There's nobody in Reactor 3. The explosion was felt 25 miles away. You really think there's anything left? Is there anybody actually that gullible thinks there's something left? Does it look like there's anything left to anybody? They're inside a building that don't exist? Inside Unit 3 had to evacuate. If you ran past Reactor 3, you die right on the spot. It's infuriating that media like that still exists. And then call it smoke. Smoke. The radioactive plume, they call smoke, covered the whole planet in 26 days. That's pretty bad. Is that not bad or is that bad? If you feel an explosion, if you're 25 miles away from your apartment building and it blows up, are you really expecting to go back? No. Smoke rose from it. And I screwed up the Japan. And did I cut that off? I could move that. Hang on. It's never a good idea for me to move shit. No, I cut it off. Oh, that's the same story. Is that the same story? Yeah, that's him right there. Japan radiation fears limit food exports. That's the same one. Oh, that's because I was showing you that. I wanted to bring you back to that same story, and I chopped it off. In the meantime, white smoke intermittently rose from two other units. Smoke at nuclear meltdowns. They're calling it smoke. As precaution, scumbags have evacuated residents within 20 kilometers because there's smoke. This is on the 23rd. The buildings are long gone by the 16th. So that's the cover story. And advised those 30 kilometers away to stay indoors and get sick and die. And the reason I say that is because, Plume covered the whole planet in 26 days, staying at ground zero within 500 miles of it. They should have evacuated Japan. And South Korea and China, of course, North Korea. And Taiwan. You think I'm kidding? As a precaution, officials evacuated residents within 20 miles. That was mighty nice of them. Tainted. Russia, radiation has seeped into vegetables. Seeped. See, whoever wrote that story had to be in the know. Yeah, it seeped into the vegetables in 14 prefectures, was banned by 55 countries for a decade. Is that what they now call seeping, I wonder? I gotta look it up in the dictionary. Seeping tainted got a new word. And you had to be pretty clever to write an article like that and use those specific words. Because this is what we deal with grammar, not that I know grammar, but we deal with their grammar all the time. And it's really stunning how brainwashing works. Vegetables that already include spinach, canola, greens, cabbage, parsley, leeks, radishes, cucumbers, cauliflower. No, that's the radiation doesn't seek out certain food. If some of it's contaminated, it's all contaminated. And the water, the trees, the bushes, the roads, everything. The air. This is the 23rd. It's still hemorrhaging radiation. Mad for a couple of years straight. Residents of cities in Japan's northeastern earlier had been advised not to drink the tap water due to elevated levels of radioactive iodines. The biggest byproduct of radiated fuel rod is a curium isotope. And curium isotope, you need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium, which is named after the devil, by the way. Most people, if you ask them to name an isotope, they'll tell you iodine, 131, and cesium-137, because you've been bombarded with it, propaganda from birth. 80 years of constant propaganda. And claiming that it causes thyroid cancer, this is textbook propaganda from nuclear industry. There's 1,800 diseases and illnesses, not immune deficiencies and injuries and illnesses besides thyroid cancer. They're so good, they're so consistent, I should say. They're not good, there's nothing good about nuclear, but they're very consistent in their propaganda administration after administration, generation after generation, regurgitating the same false narratives, the same propaganda. Because they don't want people that are paying attention to hear the discrepancies. And so they regurgitate the same narrative generationally through the inbreeding. They're very good at inbreeding with each other. Tokyo area soil testing finds radioactivity up to Chernobyl's relocation levels of almost 1 million becquerels a square meter. But it's tainted, Dana. No, you're still supposed to evacuate Japan. Anywhere in the next couple of million years would be appropriate. When you come to your senses, you should leave Japan. The U.S. Food and Drug scumbags announced Friday it will halt imports of dairy products. They removed them all in 2021. And products from the Fukushima region. Other products like seafood will still be sold to the public but screened by the scumbag industry itself. So it's not going to be screened. The degenerate, disgusting, despicable, hideous, monstrous, odious FDA has said it expects no risk to the U.S. food supply from the massive, endless radioactive fallout. It's such an offensive betrayal. You didn't hire them. You don't create the FDA to do that. You created to do the opposite. You created the FDA to protect you, not fuck you over. Not fucking make you sick and everybody in your family and everybody in your country. Did you create the FDA to do this, to pretend that didn't exist? Is that why you have the FDA? You really think you created that so they can fuck you over? I'm sorry. Starting to lose it. Had to get off camera so I can pull some more hair out of my fucking head here. Oh, Jesus, I started that again, did I? Should have just posted the show tomorrow night, because once I go down that road, there's usually no coming back. Canada restricts food imports and then lifts it 93 days later. In fact, Canada didn't put the food restrictions in until long after it was too late on top of that. And the idea was to pretend that there's not, the airborne didn't cover Canada. This is, what's the date there right now? Let me see. This is 20 days of radioactive, or after the tsunami. And then right there is 20 days after the last reactor blew up. Number 4. And number 4 blew up, baby. And remember, reactor 1 and 3 blew up too, and reactor 2. Canada's tightened restrictions. Yeah, and then the media... everybody was like, thank goodness Canada's doing the right thing. 93 days later, anybody looking? No, okay, lift all the restrictions. Did we hire like the Canadian government to do that to us? It's nothing but a, we need a revolution in Canada now. We can't survive with this so-called, our government been hijacked by criminal network of scum. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency, did we create them to do that to us, I wonder? Their job is to poison everybody. Their job is never let that food in your country. Hong Kong is blocking food imports. 55 countries blocked it for a decade. Everybody but Canada. Chiba is right alongside of Tokyo. And exempted some foods that have been certified as safe. There's no food can be certified as safe. It's all grown, like everything that's grown in the field. There's no food that's going to be immune to radiation. That's what they're trying to tell you. That food was immune to radiation. You're supposed to abandon your country, see? And planet Earth when Fukushima happened. Not just Japan, but Earth. and you're supposed to do it that week. Japan's nightmare gets even worse. All 3 damaged nuclear reactors now in meltdown. That's the 14th of March. That's 3 days later. The next 2 days, reactor 4 goes. That's 4 reactors and 8 fuel pools. Expert class development as a partial meltdown. Huh. So that's a partial meltdown looks like, is it? Wow. What part of the meltdown are we talking about? Because it looks like the reactors are gone. Right now, yeah, they're gone. That's a partial meltdown there, Dana. Stop your fear-mongering, Dana. Mom, Dana's fear-mongering. Well, this is the 14th, so I should cut him a break, right? Stop being so hard on him. It's the 14th, Dana's 3 days later. That's true, you got a point. I'm glad you brought it up. And the fuel rods inside the third were partially exposed as engineers desperately fight to keep them cool. Once the first one blows up, the engineers still haven't gone back. Trust me, they have not gone back. There's no nuclear scientists there. This is not like peanut butter. This is a nuclear meltdown. They weren't there, you washed 1,300 miles of the coastline, and over 600 kilometers of it, you went maybe 10 kilometers inland with the tsunami. This picture here is showing reactor 1, 2, and 3 have already detonated. Reactor 4 is still intact. This is satellite pictures. Now, who knows how, when they got the pictures were taken 100% that afternoon or that morning. But by the next day, reactor 4 doesn't look like that no more. Where's reactor 4? There's reactor 4 to your left. And again, that's 4 sides of reactor 4. You will never find that picture, and that's the fuel pools above me. So the building is completely... When you see all 4 sides of the buildings, how can anybody conceive that there's something left, right? This is a hydrogen explosion, which is a nuclear meltdown. The nuclear meltdown causes the hydrogen to be created in the explosion. And this is an explosion. Now debating whether a radiation cloud could reach the west coast. Well, all the models clearly show it reached the west coast. And we have the radioactive fallout studies to prove it, right? Some experts, anything with the word nuclear and expert in the industry is not going to be a very nice person. Classed at a partial meltdown in a reactor, but others would only use that term for when molten nuclear fuel melts through a reactor. Well, that's the day that it done that. That's not a melting through. That's an explosion a mile into the sky. That's totally different. That's way worse. Much, much worse. Some experts. Hydrogen explosion in reactor unit 3 at the power station earlier today, in which 11 workers were hurt. See, they even say in the next paragraph that the explosion was felt 25 miles away, and then they have the incredible arrogance to call it a partial meltdown. Then in the next paragraph say the explosions is felt 25 miles away, but don't worry, it's just a partial meltdown. Because you got nothing on the planet can stand an explosion that you're going to physically feel 25 miles away. There is nothing out there can withstand that kind of an explosion, by the way. The only way to describe the nuclear industry is just absurd degenerate scum, right? There's really no other way. So this is why we have a poll of stuff like that. Should journalists and academics and professors, etc., who lied about Fukushima fallout, work at Fukushima? And look at that, we got at least one journalist, academic, professor voted no. No! Increased the risk of a meltdown, but it was felt 25 miles away, but it increased. So this is a lobbyist wrote it, nuclear lobbying wrote it. The journalists put their name on it to make a buck and was laughing about it probably when they posted it. Saying, can't believe I'm going to make $5,000 for just doing nothing, only putting my name on a story. Earlier, engineers were frantically trying to cool the radioactive material at all the reactors with seawater, but halted the process. They were using seawater because they lost all power along the whole coastline. And the only reason you never use seawater, you're only using seawater on buildings that blew up. That's when you started using seawater. You can't use seawater on a building that's not blown up. And you can't get close to one reactor melting down, let alone 3. And, no, you're good. Next moron, you're good. Next moron, you're good. Now, to be fair, this is the 14th, but the lies that they told on the 14th are stunning. Japan, now, I've never heard this after the first month. They stopped saying this. Japan has distributed 230,000 units of stable iodine to evacuation centers as a precaution. And so that's so incredibly vague to say something like that. First, I know that actually never happened. It's just that first month we heard this narrative. We never heard it repeated after. The aircraft carrier was actually 1 mile offshore. All their digital watches stopped working at the one time. They were all defecating. The hallways were blocked with people defecating in their pants and throwing up. And the toilets were inoperable because so many, hundreds and hundreds of sailors had diarrhea at the one time from radioactive fallout. Fleet said the dose of radiation was the same as 1 month's normal background exposure to natural background radiation. And if somebody says that to my face, they're going to kick them right in the nuts, right on the spot. And if it's a female, I'm still going to kick her in the nuts right on the spot. Come on, I'm not kicking anybody. I'm 60 years old, okay? But if I was a younger man, I'd kick him right in the fucking nuts, right on the spot. In the event of a major leak, radiation would take between 7 to 10 days to cross the Atlantic. Well, it covers the whole planet in 19 days, according to Norwegian Institute for Air Research. France models show 16 days. So yeah, it'll cross the Atlantic, but it's a continuous plume. It's not like there's a plume floating across the Atlantic. It's a continuous plume covering the whole planet, see? So I don't even know what you would call it. You can't really call it a plume. You can call it a cloak of death, a blanket of death wrapped around the entire planet. The Atlantic. Oh, yes, right to across the Atlantic, which is, starts at around 7,500 miles by the jet streams, right? So, yeah, by 10 days it's crossed because this is 19 days. This is 20 days. This is 15 days after the last explosion. You can see the continuous plume. So after about a month or so, the whole planet is wrapped in a cloak of death. Tens of thousands are feared dead. Yeah. Such a heartbreaking story, every facet of it, huh? With bodies picked up from beaches along a 300-mile stretch of the coastline, it turned into a lot more than that. That's reactor 1 detonating. And they call it smoke. This is a nuclear reactor core and fuel pools detonating. This is not smoke. This is a death plume. And people that were contaminated by it couldn't even touch each other or their pets. They were separated because they were so radioactive. Then that means you're going to die not too long after that. A young woman had been isolated in a makeshift facility to screen, cleanse, and isolate people with high radiation. Isolate people with high radiation levels. Looks at her dog through a window. Isolate people with high radiation levels. Yeah, but nobody got contaminated, Dana. Fearmonger. At least 10,000 people were unaccounted for in one town, virtually wiped off the map. And so it was pretty easy to skip the nuclear meltdown because it was such a catastrophe. The tsunami, I remember, I was covering both, right? And I was heartbroken. I caught it as it happened, and I even put out 2 videos, and then the next day put out a video because the nuclear plants got hit, and I was like, oh shit, we're in real trouble. And, you know, all this was still unfolding the next day. It was such a horrible, but your media and your journalists and your professors made it a billion times worse by cutting everybody's throat. And they took great pleasure in it. They absolutely reveled in that deceit and dishonesty, that deception, that propaganda. They reveled in it for years on top of that. They bought condos and swimming pools for their homes and paid for gold teeth in their puppies. Okay, maybe not the last one, but the other 2 for sure. The gravest consequences of earthquake and tsunami could yet be felt. Scientists frantically tried to control the threat of a nuclear meltdown. Well, that's the nuclear meltdown. Boom. It's gone. There's the meltdown. 19 days later, covering the entire planet. So again, this is not, the way this story is written is not a journalist, but a journalist put their name on it and understood it was a lie. The professors that they quote in all of this purposely told lies. And if we get through this tonight, which probably won't, we'll get through a lot though. I like to overdo it. I like to have so much, it's really difficult to get through it in 2 hours. when I set up my show. And because we got delayed, we have to restart our stream. And we lost all the original votes and thumbs up on the video because we had to start a new stream. Google, I started the stream, Google just went, fuck you. Said, you can't stream. The gravest consequences of the earthquake and tsunami could yet be felt as scientists frantically try to control the threat of nuclear meltdowns. Like when I done the last show was Thursday, I switched off. Like when I woke up the next morning, I couldn't even move my left arm. I was so freaked up. And by that night, it was coming around pretty good. And the next day, I was doing okay. But I didn't even leave the house. I didn't even go into the garage or the shed. I got a whole bunch of projects I'm doing. I didn't do nothing. I just slept and tried to recover from being on the ocean all last week. We're so lucky we done that. And the forecast, I got a screen capture of the forecast from the day for the next 7 days. It's all onshore winds from the east and northeast, which is open ocean, right? And so I'm not going to go out there and get the shit kicked out of my... We got 5-day baseline, though, in on the ocean last week. That was amazing. The weather's going to break. Summer's going to come. You're going to be able to get out there every day for about 3 or 4 months, right? And so now we got a baseline. There's no species out there. You'll actually... There's a few out there, but all the nesting sites are empty. No fish jumping. The gravest consequences of the earthquake tsunami could yet be felt as the scientists frantically try to control the threat. That's really interesting. And they got men in white protective suits. These are paper suits we're talking about. These are pointless to wear at a nuclear meltdown. It's absolutely pointless. With Geiger counters and paper suits and paper masks swept Geiger counters over frightened survivors as nuclear experts around the world monitored the crippled, and they set the narrative the very next day or 2 days later, and it's never changed. We see it worldwide in every single media, exact same narratives. It's a very, like, they're downplaying every facet of it, and downplaying is being generous. They're misrepresenting every facet of it. Officials revealed that 22 people had already been recorded with radiation poisoning. They still won't even admit that, by the way. And he said around 190 were in the plant's vicinity when the radioactive steam was deliberately leaked in an attempt to cool the reactors. You couldn't, first off, the tsunami showed up 9 minutes later. And it showed up for 1,300 miles of the coastline. It ripped everything out. There was no vent. There was hand-operated valves, but there was no way to get to it. Reactor 1 melted down a few hours later. There was no venting. Venting was the propaganda, right? And it's amazing to see it. And this is on the 14th. This is absolutely stunning stuff we're talking about here tonight. The actual cover story and the incredible, monstrous betrayal. How can we ever trust anything in that industry again? How does that work? As far as I can tell, we have enough evidence to quantify criminal charges against every journalist and academic and professor on the planet, except for maybe 1% or 1%. The company conceded that the radiation levels around the complex, I'm not kidding you, by the way. Back to the story. The company which is not a non-decommissioning authority, they don't know nothing about reactors or meltdowns. They're administrations, see? And they went bankrupt within a day or two anyway. And so they were nationalized by the degenerate Japanese government. The radiation levels around the complex have risen above the safety limits, but tried to please the public by stating it did not mean an immediate threat to human health. And that's infuriating when I hear those words, not immediate threat. Well, it is. You breathe it in, it sequesters in your muscles, your organs, and your bones. Your body attacks it for the rest of your life with white blood cells. That's immediate. Is that not immediate? And because we started our show late, that's the way it goes, unfortunately. It's pretty rare to have that happen to me. And so we'll just brush it off as Google was updating its software or something. So remember these pictures. That's the 14th. This story is from the 14th. Got your paper suits on? Yeah, let's roll. Well, paper suits can't protect you from paint, actually, let alone a nuclear meltdown. It's also emerged yesterday the government ignored an explicit warning from a Japanese expert on nuclear power more than 3 years before it. So remember they were saying that there was no way the government knew. Here's a story saying the government knew. Get a load of it. The professor at Kobe University said the guidelines introduced to protect the nuclear power plants was seriously flawed and that the major plants were vulnerable to major quakes. So they were warned 3 years before this. They were warned in 2007. Japan could experience a true nuclear catastrophe in the near future. He warned in 2007. The only way anyone had any hope of reaching the stricken regions is by aircraft, helicopters. Because you wouldn't want to try to land a float plane along the coastline with all the debris. Scary scene, police officers wearing respirators with, The atoms we're talking about are with 200 million on the head of a needle, and you can't see it. 200 million. So if you can't filter that through a respiratory system, and was it wrong to build a series of atomic reactors so close to the ocean? Are you kidding me? Of course it was. There's an earthquake, 1,000 earthquakes a year, and a 3,000-year legacy of vicious tsunamis. Experts suggest, and this is where the earthquake occurred, right off that coastline where they knew the tectonic plates actually were, are right just less than 100 kilometers off that coastline. So you're guaranteed to have a tsunami, guaranteed to have massive earthquakes. It's guaranteed each year, let alone in a lifetime of a disease factory like a nuclear power plant. Experts suggest that given the whole country is an earthquake zone, there's nowhere the plant could be built which would not be at risk. There's nowhere right? So that's an interesting statement, that there's nowhere in Japan you can build a nuclear power plant where it won't be at risk. There's nowhere. Dirty bastards, eh? Unlike Chernobyl, there's no chance this could become an international accident. Really, that's an interesting statement in hindsight. Because apparently that's wrong. Well, again, this is still this is still the 14th of March, 2011 story, right? But I'm just trying to show, well, I'm not trying to show anything, I'm telling the story, I guess. But what you're able to really extract from this documentation and is the cover story. This is when they established the cover story, and they stuck with that for 12 years. So they say iodine-131 has a half-life of just 8 days. It's unconscionable that somebody, which we see all the time in the media for nuclear industry, will say something like that. This is complete misrepresentation of nuclear meltdown. Saying that there's no chance of a Chernobyl, and even today they claim Chernobyl is the world's worst nuclear accident. So that was all the way till on the 14th. That was 3 days later, and it was that chaos. But the propaganda, that was real. This is on the 14th also of March. A tsunami victim is rescued 10 miles out to sea after clinging to the roof of his obliterated house for 2 days. And, of course, this is 12 years old, so the pictures are not going to be very good. But that's a Navy ship. They sent out one of their lifeboats to rescue him. It's a gut-wrenching for me, because I remember all of this, right? Bless their hearts, look, actually taking care of him, gave him a pop or something, and got a blanket around him, and he's got a white helmet on. Look at that. Also, on the next day, on the 15th, March the 15th, 2011, markets continue to dive. This is France 24. We actually done a whole show on France 24 News, which is the French government news, last week. And I got a playlist with these 3 videos. Well, 2 in it right now. This one will go in it after the show, or it might be already added, of these particular types of videos. Because this documentation is just priceless. This is absolutely priceless. and the whole country's washed away. The Japanese government, this is Miyagi Prefecture, where they estimated 10,000 were snatched away. The Bank of Japan stepped in to keep the bank system stable for a second day, offering $98 billion of cash if needed. It lined up a record of $183 billion in the same day funds on Monday and doubled an asset buying scheme to support prices, which caused, over the next couple of weeks, they had to keep doing this. So that would also cause, on top of the damage already and the long road ahead, a massive amount of inflation, right? Tiny radioactive particles from Japan found in Iceland. Well, of course it's tiny. It flew all the way there. In Canada, they found tiny radioactive particles. There was 220 million atoms per liter. You only need one of them to get sick down the road from it. Right? So the reason they used the word tiny instead of radioactive particles was to downplay it, right? This is March the 23rd. All the reactors have already blown up. Tiny particles are found worldwide. Tiny particles. Such a betrayal. What's the solution? Well, the only solution I can think of is if you send them all into Fukushima nuclear meltdown and they get sick and die. Tiny radioactive particles were found in Iceland. Oh, and worldwide by day 26. According to the French government, it was 16 days. Radiation from the nuclear power plant in Fukushima, Japan. This is the 23rd, so these are long melted down and they're hemorrhaging. They continue to hemorrhage radiation even today, but the initial plume was a massive plume. That was, right, this was a pulse that attacked the entire planet, the entire ecosystem, the entire biosphere. And this is the catalyst for an extinction level event on this planet. And it plays out in increments over a few decades. And we are in real trouble, and we're only 12 years down the road. We're in real trouble. The director of Icelandic Radiation Safety Authority said there's no reason to fear the radiation detected in Iceland or other European countries will prove to be hazardous to people or the environment. And he's the director of Icelandic Radiation Safety Authority. And that statement is him cutting everybody's throat. His job is never, it should never be to make a statement like that. South Korea made the children stay home. So did Taiwan. And the numbers that they admitted to were really small numbers. Everybody worldwide should have stayed indoors for at least 2 months. Just go out let the adults or something to go to the shop and pick up supplies and get back in your home. That's how bad this actually was. All the birds and bees and insects should have been made to stay in shelters too. Worldwide, all the whales should have hid in shelters for a couple of years. It is assumed that a similarly insignificant amount of radiation will continue to be detected in Iceland in the coming days and weeks. It is assumed that a similarly insignificant amount, like to suggest these numbers are insignificant. France put out a cesium-137 disposition model of 1 million to 10 million becquerels per cubic meter of air. And what was the date on that? That was 7 days later. This model is on the 18th of March. So this is 5 days before the story that we're reading right now. This model was created saying 1 million to 10 million times. Well, 55 becquerels would have been an evacuation zone anywhere, any nuclear plant pre-Fukushima. Now 10 million is get sick and die. We don't care about you. We just want, we're the nuclear industry. We hate your guts. Get sick and die. It's really something. Chemicals may be traceable all around the world, similar to ash from a volcano in Iceland that went off. Well, actually, that didn't travel the whole world. Like gas, oil, and coal emissions don't create plumes that cover the planet. The only thing that does that is radiation fallout. What a disgusting thing to say. What a horrific betrayal. What an insidious, disgusting, monstrous betrayal that the director of the Icelandic Radiation Safety Authority, the professors, the academics, they all reveled in cutting your throats. He said, as soon as radiation can become 1,000 to 10,000 parts of what was detected in Europe after Chernobyl. Well, no, it was like the numbers I just showed you are absurd numbers. And we have many different isotopes with similar numbers. And as the person that he was, there's no way that he didn't know this. There's zero possibility he didn't know they were destroyed. There's zero possibility he didn't know the fuel pools didn't exist. There's zero possibility he didn't know they detonated. There's zero possibility he didn't know these plumes were covering the planet. Zero. So what is the point? How can we have a future when all of our checks and balances have been co-opted by monsters and demonic sadistic demons, actual sadistic demons, to pretend that didn't happen? But their job is to warn you, to protect you, to give you advice, not to cut your throat. Fukushima, very low levels of radiation, March the 29th. This has already circled the planet once. Like on the average, they were saying, because there was an initial pulse, but it continued to melt down, the plume covered the whole planet. But a part of the actual plume that's covering the whole planet, which was probably 6,000 miles wide, right, covering the whole, and circling the planet every 40 days, that part of the plume was a significant spike. The radioactive fallout might never stop, because it might never stop melting down, right? It's gone into China syndrome now, where it has the earth cracked open down there in multiple places, and the emissions are at over 10 lethal sieverts per hour. That's the maximum those Geiger counters can read, by the way. They're stationary Geiger counter. Low level of radioactive and mentioning iodine again. Like in a criminal court, they can't protect themselves from the lies, right? Because it's printed. That's their statements. They can't all fend that they were misrepresented or that they didn't even say it in the first place. Discovery could mean the reactor containment mechanism has been breached, but that's the 29th. So on the 29th, that model, but this was the 16th, or the 15th, March the 14th, rather. Over there is March the 12th, the reactor 1. Reactor 4 blew up on the 16th. Reactor 3 was on the 14th. I'm just horrified that all the academics, all the journalists, all the professors, all the departments we created to monitor radiation, all of them reveled in cutting our throats. Should journalists, academics, and professors, etc., who lied about Fukushima fallout, work at Fukushima? And look at all the journalists, academics, and professors who voted no. So why wouldn't they work at Fukushima if it's harmless and like a banana? Why would they vote no? And in UK, well, we expect UK to be scumbags. We're used to that, right? We've covered a lot of scumbags from UK over the years. The authorities said no concern public health or the environment as the levels are so low. But the problem, and Dr. James Gurmel from the Scottish government said the concentration of iodine, which is extremely low, is not a concern to the public or the environment. And the fact that such a low concentration of radionuclides protected demonstrated how effective the surveillance program is. That's not hubris, that's just evil. Right, the Scottish Environmental Protection Agency, the Iceland Radiation Protection Agency, the US Protection Agency, the Canadian Protection Agency, all of them worldwide done the same thing to us. And we have no one to defend us from these creatures. There's no one to hold them accountable. They have no fear of it whatsoever, or they would never make a public statement misrepresenting every facet of it, right? Japan's Nuclear and Industrial Safety Agency said the plutonium levels were not harmful to human health. By the way, we got models from TEPCO's plutonium releases put into a model of just a 239. It covers the whole planet in 20 days. The model to your left is 20 days. The model to the right is 21 days of radioactive fallout. And there's another two. The model to your left is 29 days. The model to the right is 30 days. Just hang on here, because there's one more of them. I just want to check the date. Yeah, so to the left is March the 27th. To the right is March the 28th. Their story, by the way, is 29th of March. And the 29th of March is the one to your left. It's not iodine, it's plutonium, which is named after the devil. Pretty amazing that they hate us so much. Plutonium is a substance that's emitted when the temperature is high and is also heavy, so it doesn't leak out easily. I heard that a lot back when it first happened. Oh, uranium's pretty heavy. It won't go very far before it falls out of the sky. It's really heavy. I was like, what the frig am I listening to? Plutonium is a gas, right? It's a substance that is emitted when the temperature is high. No, it's emitted when there's a nuclear meltdown. It's not created on Earth. It doesn't exist on Earth or in the solar system naturally. It's man-made. It's designated as man-made. It's unique to the solar system. Deputy Director of Japan's nuclear industry, I guess. Yeah, the Nuclear and Industrial Safety Agency's deputy director said, "Oh, it won't go very far. It's heavy." Except that it's not. There's the models of the radioactive fallout. It's so heavy it covers the entire planet in radioactive fallout. That's wow stuff, man. I mean, my goodness. If that's not hatred, what is? If that's not contempt, what actually is, I wonder? It's just, that boggles my mind. Plutonium is a substance that is emitted when the temperature is high. No, it's emitted when there's a multiple nuclear meltdowns. And it's heavy, so it doesn't leak out easily. He's the deputy director of Japan's Nuclear Industrial Safety Agency, saying that plutonium leaks out like it's water or something, right? And then the media is happy to run the story. No fact checking there. If plutonium has emerged from the reactor, that tells us something about the damage to the fuel that had breached the original containment and underlines the gravity and seriousness of the accident. Except it doesn't, because you claim that it's emitted when temperatures are hot instead of nuclear meltdowns, and it's so heavy it doesn't leak out easily. No, as soon as it loses pressure, it aerosols. Right, to keep them in special containers because they're aerosols. There's some serious hate right there, man. The owner of the plant, TEPCO, said the trace amounts of 238, 239, 240. These are not trace amounts, and this is only 239 model, by the way. Were in keeping with levels found in Japan in the past due to particles in the atmosphere from nuclear testing. But the numbers they released when put into a model created plumes covering the planet. You get how that works? All I can say is thank goodness I collect over the years so much shit. So much shit that I can do 5 shows a week. Day after day, rather, week after week, year after year. And still not be able to cover everything that I got. I don't know if that's good or pathetic. I'm not really sure. I'm pretty sure it's a little bit of both, though. U.S. experts said that there was also radioactive contamination in vegetables milked from the area near the nuclear disease factory itself. No, it's contaminated the food and water everywhere worldwide. Senor. Nuclear workers, yeah. They ran away. They didn't go back. It was the homeless, the destitute, the victims of society, the immigrants who don't speak the language were working at Fukushima. Yeah, I haven't done nothing all week. I burnt out, eh? That was a tough week last week. And I was happy to do a show tonight. I was like, I can do a show. That don't involve too much work. And the weather's really bad, so there's no incentive on top. I needed a few days to recover. So I'm feeling like I'm starting to recover. I don't feel like I've recovered yet. I still feel like I'm stunned or something. Like somebody stunned me with a... Just bear with me 1 second. I want to challenge that. But in order to challenge stuff, my mind is like those old computers that takes a little while to cycle. I gotta figure out what I've done with it. I'll get it in a second. Or I'll give up and we'll move on, one or the other. I got hopes, bear with me. Oh. Ooh, we might be in business. That's not the one yet, but hang on. Let's try this to see how this works out. I can't remember 100% where it's to. That's not what I'm looking for. That doesn't hurt. The unskilled and destitute are the hiring targets for Fukushima cleanup. The mentally handicapped are working at Fukushima and are often given second-hand paper suits, the ultimate insult, isn't it? Radiation forecasts can by no means be released to the public, decided the government on March the 15th. Showed a radioactive cloud could spread over Tokyo. Radiation forecasts were told by the government releasing would cause unnecessary panic. Why would we panic? If it's like a banana. Just show the model like a whole bunch of bananas being released into the environment. Everybody will feel safe, right? But that's not what I was looking for, so. I'll play this clip for you of Canadian David Suzuki talking about his paper, an academic study he saw, which says bye-bye Japan and evacuate North America's west coast if Unit 4 goes. And there's Unit 4 to your left, so Unit 4 is gone, right? But let's play David Suzuki. Let me adjust the volume.
So just to recap, when you look at the picture,
that's not the one I wanted.
number 4 is missing and all of number 3 is missing. And so the fuel pools were up close to the top of the building. They're long gone. David, I think you had something you wanted to say.
That the fear is if there's another earthquake of a 7 or above, that building will go, and then all hell breaks loose. And the probability of a 7 or above earthquake in the next 3 years is over 95%. I have seen a paper which says that if, in fact, the 4th plant goes under an earthquake and those rods are exposed, it's bye-bye Japan, and everybody on the west coast of North America should evacuate.
The division I ran built nuclear fuel racks for boiling water reactors exactly like Fukushima.
And so for 70 of those reactors, now he pretends that the fuel pool is still intact. That's Arnie Gunnarsson. And his wife, she was a pro-nuclear spokesperson for 2 decades or something, right? Well, reactor 4 to your left is gone. It's like Suzuki was saying, you should evacuate the coastline of North America if that happens to reactor 4. And Arnie Gunnarsson pretends that the building looks like the picture behind him instead of what it actually looks like, the picture to your right. They're showing you pictures of 3 Mile Island. About 300 workers were at the strike at Fukushima Dai-ichi plant in Japan trying to prevent the crisis from becoming something worse. And this is the March the 18th. All the reactors have blown up by that date. So far, at least 15 workers were injured by the explosions. These are nuclear meltdown explosions. An additional 17 suffer what the Japanese government calls disposition of radioactive material to their faces. No, they're talking about physical atoms on their face. But they're at the nuclear meltdown. They're being bombarded with gamma shines, X-rays, neutrons, beta rays, and everything else, right? Fallout is going to be hideous, by the way. There's no nuclear scientists going to that site, even today. It's not happening. They might go close to the site. They might go in certain parts of the site, like the South Koreans, the first scientists to ever go there. But they went there with an agenda to say that everything was safe and that the tritium water looked great. Japanese media came out immediately the day they were leaving and said, South Korea should now lift all restrictions on their foods. By the time workers at 3 Mile Island finally got things under control, but half the reactor core had melted. That's quite the interesting statement, isn't it? I don't know if that's one of the rare times I heard him admit how big the reactor meltdown actually was. And you can't control a meltdown. They didn't get nothing under control. It took 2 decades to remove the fuel and ship it to Idaho National Laboratory. That's what they got claimed anyway. Nobody knows the truth. They boil off over 1 million gallons of lethal water by the liter. It took them 2.5 years to boil that off, rather than store it for 1 million years. These are dirty bombs by the liter. But the workers there weren't exposed to much radiation at 3 Mile Island, there's Tabert. Said his friend who worked at the liquidators at Chernobyl, like most of the other people went in after the explosion fire, have not developed health problems from the radiation. That's absolutely, there was over 3 million children with disability because of Chernobyl. They closed 9,400 farms in Ireland and Scotland, United Kingdom, because of Chernobyl. But the babies born, there's endless amount of orphanages of disfigured children, right? I really find that kind of stuff offensive. It's to claim there was no adverse effects after Chernobyl is absurd. Even the reindeer in Latvia, you can still, even today, you can't consume them because of radiation. Influence of post-Chernobyl fallout on birth defects, abortion rates in Austria. The change the sex ratio of males to females, more males than females in all of Europe after Chernobyl. Prenatal loss of 400 male fetuses after Chernobyl in Czech Republic. Another, like all nuclear power plants are hemorrhaging radiation, and they know it because they study sex ratio studies around power plants, for instance, means everybody must be getting irradiated for that study to be even funded. So the fact they've done the study is proof they recognize that everybody's getting irradiated. And more males than females means less population of all species. It's not just humans, it has to be all species. Non-thyroid cancers in Ukraine post-Chernobyl. Congenital abnormality registry in Belarus. Fallout from Chernobyl and cancer in Finland. Down syndrome time clustering in January 1987 in Belarus, linked with Chernobyl. Down syndrome studies in the United Kingdom too. They closed 9,400 farms in Ireland and Scotland, United Kingdom, because of Chernobyl. 400 still closed today. Non-thyroid cancer incidents in Belarus residents exposed to Chernobyl. Fallout in childhood and adolescence. Prenatal mortality in England and Wales after Chernobyl. And so why would you do all these studies if there's no adverse side effects from the radiation? Claiming that no one developed health problems after that. It's just, who was that? Let me see if we can get their name there somewhere. I guess not, eh? Let's keep going. Early radiation data from near plant ease health fairs. This is March the 18th. This is 2 days after the last detonation of a nuclear power plant and fuel pools. Early radiation data from near plant eases health fears. Very important information says Hiroshima-based researcher Double, who had been studying the health of atomic bomb survivors for decades. They only studied external doses. And, you know, why did they build a city back on a nuclear bomb crater? They've been studying everybody there that was there originally for over 70 years now. And, you know, nuclear bomb, this was the early models of the nuclear weapons, right? These were 15 kilotons. And it's not like a nuclear meltdown where you're talking about millions and millions and millions of pounds. You're actually only talking about around 10 pounds. You're talking about a blast, that incinerated hundreds of thousands of people. It blew horses 600 feet into the air and people. There's a lot of dead people who died from falling from the sky after it being, they died from the explosion, I'm sure, but they were thrown 500 and 600 feet up in the air and they came down and landed all over the place. They're the first systemic ground level measurements we made public since the crisis began last weekend. So this is the 18th. You're right at the very beginning of it. These were incredible numbers. The readings 10 times above background. I don't think one would bat an eyelash at, really, said David Brenner, the director of Columbia University Center for Radiation Research. So these are prestigious jobs they're talking about, these people got. And they all come out and cut your throat when there was a nuclear accident. They all ran out, the media went to them, they all told you that you're a scumbag, get sick and die, and fuck you and your kids and your community, fuck you. That's what they're saying to you, right? Go fuck yourself, get sick and die. David Brenner, the director of Columbia University Center for Radiation Research, stabbed you in the back. There's no health risk, the degenerate agrees. If these numbers were to continue for the next week or two, there's still no there's no immediate health risk. The ultimate betrayal is when your academics does everything they can to fucking sabotage the future of humanity and the 8 million species. Their job is not to do that. His job is the protection, for God's sakes. The director of Columbia's University Center for Radiation Research immediately came after the nuclear meltdown and tried to cut your throat. Well, did actually. Successfully stabbed you in the back. The despicable, disgusting, hideous parasite said, looking at it another way, a person can spend an entire year at Fukushima hotspot and still not receive a lethal dose of radiation, although he might suffer some radiation symptoms like nausea. Like, I can't even wrap my mind around somebody from the protection agencies at a university would say something like this. At a confirmed 8 fuel pools with 4 reactor cores detonating and melting down. I can't reconcile that. I'd pull his fucking eyebrows out if I ever caught him. Hey, I already lost it earlier, I might as well lose it. It's just infuriating. It's just like his arsehole should be sewed up. He should never be allowed to shit again. Although, they don't call me the nuclear proctologist for nothing. I got to read that again. I'll probably calm down if I read it 3 times like Beetlejuice, right? If I say it 3 times, I might calm down. Look at it another way. A person can spend an entire year with a fuel rod up his arse and still not receive a lethal dose of radiation. Can spend an entire year at Fukushima hotspot and not receive a lethal dose. It's one of the most absurd statements, and I've heard some doozies in the nuclear industry, man. James Colbert said similar statement. He said you have to put your nose right down where the radiation is and breathe it in for a whole year to get nausea. And then they provide a diagram where they equate it with dental, chest x-rays, airplane trips, background, smoking 1.5 packs of cigarettes a day. Somebody should stuff 1.5 packs of cigarettes a day up his nose. That should be his punishment. And people like that should be sent to Fukushima and disposed of, right? Should journalists, academics, and disgusting parasite professors, etc., who lied about Fukushima fallout work at Fukushima? Duh, Dina. I know, I'm just trying to do it for entertainment. For comparison, an airline passenger on a flight from New York to Los Angeles would get 0.2 millisieverts from high altitude cosmic rays. It's got nothing to do with anthropogenic man-made fuel rods. Got nothing to do with nuclear wastelands. It's got nothing to do with radioactive fallout. Nothing. Nothing whatsoever. It's got nothing to do with it. Should people like that have their arms torn off at least? So that's kind of a sin, because somebody's going to have to wipe their arse, right, at some point. He warned people living within 30 kilometers of the Dai-ichi plant to stay indoors to avoid potential health risks from the radiation. Why do I torture myself, I wonder, these stories? Because this is a form of torture, right? At least I'm not a cutter, I suppose. A four reactor Dai-ichi complex also caught fire, released more radiation. The fire was extinguished. Nobody extinguished the fire. There's nobody going to extinguish those fires. They don't even need oxygen. You can't extinguish them. They either go out on their own or they don't go out. They don't even need oxygen. They can burn underwater for 1,000 years. That's what makes them so insidious, by the way. And they're always consuming, atomizing, aerosoling, ionizing, and radiating everything that they come in contact with. Oh my goodness. Let's see what we got done here. It's 12:40. It's almost 1 a.m. in the morning. I'm still not finished. Damn you, Google. Google canceled my first show tonight just as I tried to start it. I had to redo everything. I gave it an hour just in case there really was an issue. We might still get to streaming, right? And we did. And I forgot how much I hate these stories, because this stuff damages me, right? These types of lies it's unbelievable offensive. Yeah, water's part oxygen, that's right. But this doesn't need oxygen. This can be 1,000 miles deep in the earth with no oxygen. It'll still burn. It's going to be in outer space, I would imagine it'll still burn. Japan Nuclear Safety Agency said Monday is suspected the blast of Unit 2 of the plant may have damaged the bottom of the containment that surrounded the generator's nuclear core. They're actually like schizophrenics, aren't they? Technicians desperately work to prevent the uranium rods in number 2 reactor. What was the date on this again? This was the 18th, wasn't it? Yeah, the 18th. So technicians are working to prevent the uranium rods in Unit 2 reactor from overheating after they were exposed twice on Monday. No. Unit 2 burned continuously for several days. Unit 1 detonated, Unit 2 detonated, Unit 3 detonated, Unit 4 detonated. All of them went into China syndromes. Water levels were restored after the first dropped at the reactor, but the rods remained at least partially exposed Monday night after the second episode. And remember, this is the 18th. Reactor 2 blew up on the 13th. You 1 and 3 are at least somewhat stabilized for the time being. No, reactor 1 and 3. I showed you the pictures earlier of the detonations from reactor 1 and 3. 920. Why do gotta be so hard to get along with all the time, right? There's reactor 1 and 3. That looks pretty stable to me, Dana. I don't know why you got to fearmonger so much. Yeah, that total stable to me too. Unit 1 and 3 are somewhat stable. I gotta look at that one more time. I'm sorry, but no, that's not stable. Unit 1 was the 12th, and Unit 3 was the 14th of March. Officially declared a state of emergency at 6 Fukushima reactors, 3 at the Dai-ichi and 3 at the Daini. The Daini is the evil twin. It's 10 kilometers south at the same sea level, which is just straight in from the earthquake itself. It's right at ground zero. And they're now allegedly going to decommission it. But we have a lot of documentation that some of the reactors at the Daini plant melted down. And also another plant, right? Unit 3 reactor rocked by earlier explosion, early Monday. The second explosion in 3 days rocked the Fukushima Daiichi plant, sending a massive cloud of smoke into the air. Massive cloud of smoke into the air. No, this was the fuel pool in the reactor corridor. This was the building was leveled. There was only a stump left. It's really amazing. Here's that picture shortly after reactor 3 blew up. Does that look stable to anybody? Anybody? That's one side. Here's another side, I think. Yeah, there's the front to the right, and there's the back of it, reactor 3. I got to make a just hang on. It's pretty amazing how evil this industry actually is. Okay, here we go. Smoke. Every time I heard the word smoke, it's such an insult to humanity. Because this is not smoke, this is reactor cores and fuel pools. The blasted Unit 3 reactor authorities have been trying to cool with seawater. Well, the only thing you can try to cool would be the fuel pool. The reactor's pressurized to over 1,000 psi, so there's no way to get water in there. And they knew adding salt water to the fuel pools would cause a meltdown. They were aware of this. The sulfur would also cause huge issues if it caught fire or detonated, and it done both. U.S. officials said exposure levels were equal to 1 month's normal exposure to natural background radiation environment for the sailors, right? Again, this was quoted on a different date than the last one. That got to get fixed. We can't have a future with nuclear on our planet. We simply can't have a future. And I'm going to have to call it a night because this is an hour almost past what I was expecting to be doing tonight. That's okay. We got an hour and 40 minutes in or something like that. Shout out to Stephen Young, donated $50. I got so many things that are broken. So I have to be very careful what I do, which way I go this week. I'm going to have to try to get into gear tomorrow or next day. I'm still recovering from 5 days on the ocean, and I'll show you the forecast for the next 7 days so you can understand why I'm thinking the way I'm thinking. It'll help you understand. I'm just going to mark my spot so I can find it. I don't redo it tomorrow or something. I did 15, 20. And we got another show like this for tomorrow night or the next night, I'm not sure. Might as well, we should do another show tomorrow night of this stuff because this is great stuff, eh? This is my forecast for tomorrow from the 5th to the 11th. And the winds are going to be blowing from the northeast. Now, they've been blowing from the northeast for about 3 days, and we're out in the open Atlantic Ocean. And so when the winds are blowing from the east or northeast, they're coming straight in from the open Pacific Atlantic Ocean. And so it's slow, even if it's not really heavy winds, and that might change too, right? The week, hopefully. But the weather will always pick up in the afternoon, and it'll be double those numbers you're looking at on this part of the coastline, is what I've noticed over the years. So it's cold, wet, cloudy, and the winds are from offshore. And so it's hard for me to go out on the boat and do species counts because you're going to get the shit kicked out of you. And we got a bunch of stuff to fix, so hopefully I can figure out what can get fixed and be fixed and get something started. Because I can't let this pile up on me, right? The trick is to do what you can when it's happening and stay ahead of it. And good luck on staying ahead of it. I had an extraordinary last year. This year's been really tough years. But, we got a few supporters. We're still keeping the whole show moving forward, thank goodness. And I don't know how to give up. It's not a flaw, I suppose, but we don't, I should say we don't have a right to give up, is how I see it, reality. I'll say I don't know how to give up, but right, that's a third person or first person kind of way. Because I get it, there's no one to replace me to tell the story and keep this conversation going in educational programs. And so we've really got to have somebody on the planet that's not going to be manipulated or not going to be deceptive or deceitful. And so I don't really have I don't mind doing what I'm doing, obviously, right? And we got to have somebody out there being honest. We got to have someone doing species counts. So when the weather breaks, because summer is always late getting here. Once the weather breaks, we should get flat, calm weather for 3 months or so. Where you can go out every single day if you want to, and it'll be hot. Beautiful temperatures, lots of sunshine. You can see long distances underwater and stuff like that. So we already got a baseline of 5 days on the ocean last week. And I'm going to pick up here at the next show. We got a whole bunch of this stuff I wouldn't mind getting through. We're like 12 years behind, but we'll get through it. The moment nuclear, and I'll just do that headline, we'll call it a night. The moment nuclear plant chief wept as Japan finally admitted that the radioactive fallout was lethal. They finally admitted it. It was happening all along, but they wouldn't admit it. And I showed you a whole bunch of them tonight. And the problem with the story is, and I learned this a long time ago, sometimes because you're covering so much, you kind of want to rush a little bit to get caught up. That's a mistake, because what you see when we're doing this is every other paragraph is propaganda, and you notice this showing up everywhere. This propaganda, and from all these experts, and if that doesn't concern humanity, it will if you see it, if you find it. That will concern anybody. I would hope. I would imagine. It should frighten, because it frightens me that people like this exist. The head of all the major radiological departments in all these countries are the first one to cut our throats. The professors from the universities are the first one to cut our throats. The academics are the very first one to cut our throats, right? Yeah, good night, everybody. Thank you, everybody. I know it's late, so it's not the normal schedule, and that's because Google fucked us over. And let me put that video. I done a interview yesterday. I don't think the audio works the way it's supposed to until 14 minutes in or something. But then everything is good for the next 3 hours. Let me put that link in there again, just in case. And if you can, at least go over there and give Monique a thumbs up on that video. I just posted in the description again. Just try to elevate the video up there and might get out there. More people from that part of the world might see it. She's in Netherlands. I butcher a lot of names of countries. And I've already done it to Monique, I'm sure, a few times. But it was actually a really good interview. I had done one before a few weeks ago. And you're just running through the whole story for 3 hours because everybody there, you're assuming, never seen nothing. So it's kind of a refreshing one. And then we took questions for the last 40 minutes of that interview. And I wasn't feeling my best, but I thought we'd done a pretty good job. We're going to close the poll down. We got spammed. A bunch of journalists, academics, professors desperately came in and spammed us. No. Should mass murdering journalists, mass murdering academics, mass murdering professors, mass murdering pro-nuclear scum who lied about Fukushima fallout work at the Fukushima nuclear meltdown? Well, they're running out of homeless, so I think it's a pretty good idea. Why would you vote no to that, really? So it was a great poll. Thank you, everybody that participated in the poll. Good night, everybody. God bless everybody. Have a great night, a great day tomorrow. I'm only right tonight. I started really around supper time. I started coming around. And I've been pretty lethargic since the last show. I've never left the house, never done nothing. I got a couple of news cycles. I went through them and gathered them up. So we got a couple of those shows ready to go. But I was pretty relaxed about it. If I even felt drowsy, I just lid down and went to sleep right away. Yeah, thanks Dana and Asana for moderating. We appreciate it. See everybody tomorrow night. If you made it this far, folks, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. It probably won't register. It costs us very little. And it could go a long way. You never know, right? So don't forget to give us a like, subscribe, and click that notification bell. You don't know. It could work. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night. Good night, everybody. Take care.